Matt Caldwell, again, thank you for joining us. I want to start with an issue that's in the news. President Trump announced an agreement with both Mexico and Canada to revamp NAFTA. I want to get your impressions. Do you think it's a deal that protects Florida farmers?
Florida farmers are at a disadvantage. There's no question about it. When NAFTA was signed in '94, it decimated our row crop industry, tomatoes and peppers, and we haven't had a change in this cycle. You know, Florida is different than the other 49 states. This deal really improves on the manufacturing side, and so I'm going to continue to be an advocate, hopefully in the position as agriculture.
But again, do you think this deal, because I know that one of the things that Florida farmers were looking for was greater protection in terms of being able to file grievances and take it to various courts, international courts, to be able to appeal things that Mexican dumping produce into the United States. That seems to not be in this agreement. Would you oppose this agreement, or what would you do as Ag Commissioner to change this agreement?
I would add the seasonality provision so that you can push back against Mexico. They have demonstrated that they're trying to bankrupt our farmers by dumping produce into the United States at below market costs, and we need to add seasonality. And so, look, the changes that have been made really focus in large part on the manufacturing sector that was also decimated by the NAFTA agreement.
The auto manufacturing.
Auto manufacturing, the Midwest. So that's an improvement. I'm going to continue to push, and hopefully as commissioner be able to push to say seasonality has to be added to this agreement.
All right, let's stay with the agriculture part of the job description. I know that you've dealt with citrus and believe that there's a crisis within the Florida citrus industry. What would you do about that?
Well, citrus is at a crossroads. You know, it's changed considerably over the last 30 years. It became a global commodity when Brazil entered the market. You go back 40 years ago, we were the only ones supplying the whole world, and it was a pretty easy and heady time. But the way that citrus greening and canker have decimated production, we've got to really buckle down on it. So as commissioner, you're going to see me continuing to commit to disease and research focuses at both the USDA and the IFAS Center that we have in Lake Alfred, where we're trying to figure out new ways to treat the disease and new varieties that are resistant to the disease so that we can continue to keep that role in agriculture. I
want to turn to environmental issues more broadly. I know that in the legislature you supported building the reservoir south of Lake Okeechobee for the runoff purposes. You were also part of, I always get the name of it confused, Legacy Florida, that bill that sort of sets aside $200 million a year of Amendment 1 money for environmental protection. Yeah. So those are on the plus side, yes, and I'll get you a chance to talk about that as well. But on the other side, I know that in 2016, you voted on a water quality bill that seemed to ease restrictions on polluters. And also in 2016, you voted for House Bill 191, which would have allowed fracking. These seem like inconsistent positions to be environmentally sensitive in one hand and environmentally detrimental in the other.
Well, on both of those supposedly negative counts, I mean, it's just a fake talking point from radical Democrats that are trying to attack me. When you look at the issue of fracking, the bill that we passed would have put a permanent moratorium on non-conventional exploration, and the only way you could have brought it back was taking a subsequent vote of the legislature. It funded a research project on exactly how the impacts of fracking would affect our geology, which is different from the rest of the country, and it funded both of those. And so I really am stunned still to this day that those on the left refused to join with us and move forward a bill that would have put a moratorium on fracking. It's
let's put it more plainly. Would you support a ban on fracking?
Well, again, I supported a moratorium because we don't know what it does to our geology. We have limestone. The rest of the country has shale, two totally different rocks, and until we know for sure what that's going to mean in limestone, I don't think we should allow it. So that's why we would have had a moratorium and funded a research project done specifically to focus on Florida geology and whether or not it's a plus or minus. And the result of that is what the legislature would have taken action on.
And on the issue of easing restrictions or restrictions on polluters, penalties on polluters who involve water quality issues?
Again, a false talking point. People that are trying to twist up the reality of the situation. The Department of Environmental Protection is in charge of water quality throughout this state. And anyone who impacts water quality, whether that's farmers or suburban developers or your downtown urban development, all of those have to meet water quality standards. When you're talking about a farm, the Department of Agriculture and UF-IFAS develop the standards for how you operate your farm practice so that you don't adversely affect water quality. If you're talking about inside the city, you've got engineering standards of how how to build your stormwater ponds, how to build your catch basins in an urban downtown environment. All of these things are put out to the experts, and so I disagree with that
characterization.
Yeah.
Well, you agree. Let me just ask you this on the water quality issue. You're right, the Department of Environmental Protection sets water quality standards, as do the water management districts, but the Ag Commissioner plays a role in sort of negotiating and helping along that process with regard to the farming community. Do you believe the farming community, particularly north of Lake Okeechobee, has been a problem in terms of polluting the lake?
Everyone historically has been a problem when it comes to the Everglades. You know, first and foremost, we're dealing with a flood control project. Nobody could live west of I-95 in Dade, Broward, or Palm Beach counties if it wasn't for the flood control system. It was 6 feet deep in 1947 in the town of Davie. Now you got 3 million people that live in the New Orleans of Florida. All the other questions that come out of this have to be wrapped up in the understanding of the flood control that provides. And if we're going to redesign it, that's what we've got to focus on.
I want to try to focus it. So is that a yes? You believe that farming has played a detrimental role into Lake Okeechobee, into the pollutants going into Lake Okeechobee? And if you agree with that premise, that they at least play a part of the role, what would you do to correct that?
Absolutely. Everybody, farming, development, we've changed the landscape totally. You know, north of the lake there used to be a 100-mile Kissimmee River. Now it's a 50-mile canal, and we dump all the water, whether it's from Disney World or Kissimmee St. Cloud, the towns, or whether it's from the farms along there. And so each one of them have to meet water quality standards. That's what the Basin Management Action Plan process, the BMAP, people here referred to, does. It requires not just farmers, but urban and suburban development to all meet the water quality standards, and together that's going to be the actual solution.
I just want to raise the issue of sugar. You've also been criticized for taking a fairly large amount of campaign contributions from the sugar industry. I know that in 2013 you were one of the people identified who went to the U.S. Sugar hunting ground ranch in Texas. Are you too close to sugar to do your job?
Well, again, I've told everybody since the day I first ran for office, I won't take money from strip clubs or pornographers, but anybody else that wants to support me, I've got a vision. I outline that vision. I've got a proven record in the legislature of accomplishment when it comes to water policy, when it comes to Everglades policy, when it comes to conservation lands. I would argue that in the last 8 years, and certainly the last 4 years, we've done more, going to construct more projects, and will in the next 10 years construct more to make a difference than the previous half-century combined. And I've been a direct leader in each and every one of those decisions.
I want to go over a couple of quick issues with regard to marijuana and guns, but with regard to marijuana, do you support allowing a smokable version of medical marijuana?
I'm going to follow the science, and as long as I have doctors who tell me that smoking a plant, whether it's marijuana or opium or anything, is the wrong way to deliver medicine because you can't control dosing, you can't control efficacy, then I'm not going to move forward on it.
So you oppose it?
Based on the fact that I don't have doctors telling me that's the way to deliver medicine. They tell me that the way we've designed it is the way you deliver medicine.
And let me ask you this. On the issue of banking, when I interviewed your Democratic opponent, Nikki, she talked about the idea of trying to set up a state bank, or trying to have some sort of a state bank, because anyone involved in the marijuana industry right now can't put their money into federally insured banks for fear of having it seized. And rather than have these groups, these businesses have, basically keeping large amounts of cash on hand in safes, which is a dangerous proposition, she suggests that there should be some sort of state bank. Do you agree with that?
Well, there are a difference between federal chartered banks and state chartered banks. There's state chartered banks that are conducting business with these operators right now. We have a medical cannabis industry that's providing low THC as well as THC marijuana to patients every single day, and it's working now. Federal banks don't want to be involved, as you said, because they're worried about RICO and interstate commerce. The real solution is going to be to push to downschedule the drug at the federal level. If we move it from Schedule 1 down to Schedule 2, then all of these other problems become much easier to deal with.
All right, let's talk about guns for a second. You voted against the Stoneman-Douglas bill. You've courted the NRA. You have an A+ rating from the NRA. One of the criticisms of the office when it dealt with what Adam Putnam was doing in terms of processing concealed weapons permits and the problems that they were associated there was you had individuals there say that they felt as if they were working for the NRA to move permits along, to move the process along. Your closeness to the NRA How would you break that perception that the Ag Commissioner's office is basically an extension of the NRA?
Well, I think anybody who's worked with me over the last 8 years, where we've over time and again passed bills with nearly unanimous bipartisan support, recognizes I work for the people that elect me, whether that's the 156,000 in my House seat or hopefully the 21 million Floridians this office represents. And that's the same way I'd operate this responsibility. No one should get a license if they don't meet the qualifications. If someone's not doing their job, they should get fired. We've been assured that the process has been revised, and on day one after the election, we have a 2-month transition. That's an issue I'm going to personally take a look at, make sure that I'm satisfied that the safeguards are in place so that we don't have the kind of problem that happened before happen again. Look, I'm proud to constantly be fighting to make the government obedient to the Constitution, and whether that's the Second Amendment or the First Amendment or the 19th Amendment. The key is that the government belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to powerful lobbied interest or anyone who's looking to just influence it for their own personal outcome.
And your opposition to the Stoneman-Douglas bill was based on what?
Yeah, this problem comes down to mental illness. Mental illness is the #1 common factor in every single mass shooting. The kinds of gun control items that were listed in that bill had no impact on what happened at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, no impact on what happened at any of the other events around the country. And so if we're not serious about the problem, what I fear is that we're going to treat it as solved when it's not actually solved. When you're not being serious about what are essentially lone wolf terrorists, young men who are deeply troubled and shouldn't be in those situations at all. They shouldn't be attending school in those situations when they are displaying the kind of behavior that, in this case, Mr. Cruz had done multiple times over his previous 3 or 4 years.
Matt Caldwell, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right.